So we do have a number of Montreal Canadiens topics to dive into, from the amazing contract signing of Ivan Demidov to what Kent Hughes essentially said about Kirill Marchenko and Matthew Knies. There are a number of Canadiens news and notes to dive into on this beautiful Thursday morning, but let's get everything underway by talking about Mr. 9.1 himself. Ivan Demidov is signed till the end of 2035. It was the best contract handed out to anybody during the opening day of free agency in 2026 yesterday. And I don't think anybody is happier than Canadiens fans. Except maybe, Team England fans at the World Cup. Yeah, they kind of pulled one out of the hat yesterday, didn't they? Anyways, Ivan Demidov had 62 points in 82 games played in his first NHL campaign. This follows up the crazy hype that we saw from last season, 24-25, when he was the best player on SKA St. Petersburg, and when his flight from Moscow to Canada was the #1 tracked flight on the planet. Again, I don't know if it's technically on the planet because the plane was flying in the air, but anyways, there was a crowd waiting for Demidov in Toronto, where he ended up landing in Canada. He was greeted with a big, sensational cheer from Habs fans, and he ended up not disappointing in his opening few games in the league. This previous season only cements what is going to be a very bright future for this guy with the Habs. In fact, if you take a look at The Athletic and their analysis of the contracts handed out yesterday, courtesy of their article, NHL Free Agency Best and Worst Deals on Ivan Demidov, Jacob Trouba, and many more, The Athletic says that Demidov is arguably, if not definitely, the best contract handed out. Right now, at 20 years old, he has an $11.2 million market value, and the contract he did receive is $9.1 million. There is a 79% chance of positive value probability on this deal. And if you take a look at what the write-up says here on the Athletic piece, it should come as no surprise what the best deal of the day was. The Montreal Canadiens did it again, locking up Ivan Demidov for the next 8 seasons at just a $9.15 million cap hit. For 4 of these years, there will be less than $1 million separating Demidov's cap hit from Jacob Trouba's. Obviously, UFA and RFAs aren't apples to apples, but that juxtaposition is the most jarring aspect of the day. Demidov is coming off a sensational rookie year where he had scored 62 points. It's not difficult to see him putting up 90 one day. There is extremely little risk here, given Demidov's explosive growth potential, and this deal will likely be a steal for Montreal for years to come, even if he just ends up as an everyday top-line player. If Demidov hits his ceiling, though, it has the potential to challenge Lane Hutson's deal for the best in the league. 2 contracts at the best of the league spot in Montreal. How great is that, eh? Speaking about Canadiens contracts, turns out no one on this Canadiens team is paid more annually than Carey Price was 8 years ago. And I don't know if that's really something that Canadiens fans should be proud of their team to be able to say. It's like, oh yeah, there is so much value going around between Demidov, Hudson, Suzuki, Slavkovsky, Caulfield, Dobson, Matheson, Gooley, all these guys that have signed long-term, but nobody was more expensive than Carey Price on a year-by-year basis. Now, does that say a lot about Price? Yeah, absolutely. It says that he was the best goalie in the league. Rarely do you see goalies win the Hart and the Ted Lindsay and the Vezina. Price definitely deserved being amongst the top, but he was making $10 million a year. I get it, Carey was great, but right now you can take a look at that contract and say, maybe that dollar amount made it harder to put a good team in front of him to win. Now, speaking about acquiring players and getting guys, there are two other names that I think we should dive into in today's commentary. Kirill Marchenko and Matthew Knies. Two guys that at the time of recording this audio are not Montreal Canadiens, nor it doesn't seem like they will be Montreal Canadiens. If by the time this video is public on YouTube, they actually are Canadiens, or one of them is, or one of them gets traded, then okay, we're going to have to make another video about that. But I wanted to talk about what Kent Hughes spoke about in regards to overpaying for players in trades. He said this yesterday during the Demidov press conference. We've already tried to make trades that some people would have said are overpayments, but it didn't work. If we make a big trade and we sacrifice part of our future, it won't be for a 34 to 35-year-old player. Kent Hughes essentially saying that, yeah, we're not going to overpay for guys that are at the tail end of their careers. We are going to overpay for guys that actually align with the timeline of success we are building with the top-tier guys that we have right now. Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky, Demidov, these guys are in a very defined age range of 1998 to, let's say, 2005 born players. So obviously, you're not going to get somebody who is from 1980 whatever at the tail end of his NHL career. Kent Hughes said, we've already tried to make those trades. Some people said are overpayments, but it didn't work. But we have limits because we have very good players who we believe will be very good NHL players and not in a long time. There is a balance. Every time we evaluate a situation like that, I can't say whether it'll only come from our system or if we'll make a big trade. But one thing is certain, if we make a big trade and we sacrifice a part of our future, it won't be for a 34 to 35-year-old guy. It'll be for someone who can contribute to the team for many years in the future. And you think about the translation over here. This is what this comment says from Kozed. Translation. We swung for the fences on Knies, but that organization was too incompetent to complete the trade in time. And then we swung for the fences for Marchenko, but that organization doesn't know what's good for them. I'd say that that's essentially what's going down here. Kent Hughes obviously is not directly talking about Marchenko and Knies, but there are some very clear parallels between the reported status of what these guys were going through on the trade front in regards to Montreal and what Kent Hughes is talking about here. Kirill Marchenko was born in 2000. He's a 25-year-old dude. Matthew Knies was 02, 23 years old. These guys fit the timeline of what Montreal is trying to build. And if you were to say Demidov is a piece of this Canadiens team's future, why not pair him with Kirill Marchenko and then put in Alexander Zhuravsky into the mix and maybe, I don't know, toss Demidov at center? Have an all-Russian line, reinvigorate what was the Russian 5 in Detroit, except do it in Montreal with a forward core that has Marchenko, Zhuravsky, and Demidov, and then maybe add in Pugachev for some extra physical depth? There's a lot that the Montreal Canadiens could do with this Russian thing going on, but I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comments section. How do you feel about the Demidov contract, and how do you feel about Kent Hughes speaking out about overpaying in trades? Another one of these replies says that I have a suspicion that Hughes and Gorton aren't thinking about this as if the rebuild is over and the Canadiens are in win-now mode. I think they're still thinking their window truly opens a year or two from now, and that the rebuild is still ongoing, but just ahead of schedule. Kent is probably as disappointed as anyone that no trades have happened. I agree. I don't think it's for a lack of trying. The issue is, of course, the price. The Habs have made it very clear that Hage is not moving and that they view him as a legit 2C. I believe that at the deadline, they were willing to move Zhuravsky, but I think that him coming here this summer and his bonding with Demidov might have changed his availability. That would only leave Reinbacher as potential leverage, and the Canadiens' pipeline is being filled with right-handed D, but they are all years away. Does not leave much in the way of primary trade assets. So, ultimately, you can let me know your thoughts in the comments section. How do you feel about Marchenko, about Knies, what Kent Hughes said about making trades, and the Demidov conversation as well? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.